Welcome, Kim. Lovely to see you with us.
Thank you, Katrina. It's so nice to see you all, because I haven't been able to get to the QI conference for many years. And although I've sort of in heart and minds felt part of it all, and some of you have come to us at Bristol. I was at Bristol University for many years, and Tammy, I remember you coming and doing this amazing performance for us. When Katrina asked me this, my first instinct was, oh, yeah, I've got nothing to say, or and then I realized, of course, I had a lot to say. I worked and lived in Bristol for a long time and was part of the academic community there. And some of you will know that's a very rich narrative community with Jane and several of us who were very much wedded to the methodologies that we found a home for when we came to QI. But part of what's been stirred up in me is this thing about separation and connection, both in my personal therapy and in my life. This coming here and being separated has triggered that. So I wanted to share with you a story of meeting Rose, my grandmother, and I called it a mini autoethnography, or a 5-minute autoethnography. So I'm going to read it to you. As a therapist currently working online during this pandemic with clients experiencing complex and intergenerational trauma, I have become increasingly aware of the impact on me of the enforced physical separation from most of those I hold dear. On the outside, I'm managing very well. Internally, and in my personal therapy, my body is responding to the echoes of my grandmother's legacy, not spoken about during my mother's lifetime and unknown to me until very recently. My grandmother Rose died in 1945 when I was 5 years old. I don't remember the one time we met during those first 5 years of my life. Rose was born in a small town near Galway City on the west coast of Catholic Ireland in 1882. She was the youngest of 4 girls born to Thomas and Catherine. Thomas was a baker and part owner of a newspaper, and Catherine was a local midwife. Rose became pregnant when she was 21, and as there was no candidate for the shotgun wedding, she was sent to the Magdalene Institution in Galway City, which was run by the Sisters of Mercy. The institution consisted of a convent for the nuns, a laundry and living quarters for the inmates, 70% of whom were pregnant or unmarried mothers. Some were as young as 14. They were thought of as fallen women. Many of them had been raped or sexually abused. The Maggies, as they were called, wore penitence caps, large boots and heavy ankle-length skirts. After Mass each day, their heavy work started at 8 a.m., boiling and lifting waterlogged sheets from one vat to another, then mangling, drying them over racks, and the final ironing. The heat was suffocating. They had to stay at their workstation, working in silence until a bell rang. Although the laundry was a profitable enterprise, supported by the Irish government, which funneled money towards the system in exchange for laundry services, the Maggies received no wages, their food was poor and scarce, the women were locked in, or should I say, locked down. On Saturdays, they scrubbed the dormitories and the laundry from top to bottom. On Sundays, they were allowed to listen to Irish radio for 1 hour. During an interview in 1958 with the then Mother Superior, she said, "A girl cannot leave when she likes. No, we're not as lenient as that. The girl must have a suitable place to go. Some stay here for life." There were 41 such institutions operating in Ireland from the late 1800s until the last one closed in Dublin in 1996. There were similar institutions in the UK and across North America, in New York, Boston, Chicago, and Toronto. Those mainly Protestant institutions had originally been set up to provide refuge for prostitutes. The culture of Ireland, dominated by the Catholic Church, was very different from life in the major cities. Children born to the inmates of the Galway institution were usually placed in St. Anne's, another institution 30 minutes walk away from where the Maggies lived. And those children saw their mothers once a year. My mother, Bridie, was born in 1903 and placed in an orphanage in the town from which her mother came. So although her mother was alive and her grandparents and aunts were living locally, she was deemed to be an orphan. Bridie remained at the orphanage until she was 15 years old. In the 1911 census, my grandmother Rose, then aged 29, was still listed with another 100 women at the Magdalen Institution. I don't know how long she remained there after that, but her marriage to Peter when she was 36 provided her with a suitable place to take 15-year-old Bridie to live, at the lodge cottage that came with Peter's job as a gamekeeper and head gardener of a large country estate overlooking Galway Bay. Bridie was known to the people who owned the big house as Rose's orphaned niece. As a tragic orphan figure, she received special attention and treats from them, frequently riding beside them in their carriage to visit the surrounding countryside. Had she been known as Rose's illegitimate daughter, things would have been very different for the whole family. Rose and Peter lived and worked on the estate until Rose died at the age of 63. She had raised 2 further children, as well as losing a 3rd child who died at the age of 10, my namesake, Rosaline. Bridie left Ireland for England in her mid-20s, where she married and raised my 7 brothers and myself. But that is another story for another time. This pandemic has created the space and raised the need in me to connect with the strength and resilience of my grandmother Rose and my mother Bridie, who survived their lives in Ireland in spite of the separations and silences imposed on them by the shaming attitudes of the Catholic Church at that time. Their survival has allowed me to thrive, despite some major challenges. I now welcome these women into what Michael White called membership of my club of life, part of the interconnected web of relationships that strengthen who I am today as I approach my 80th birthday, still locked down, but free. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Has anyone would like to respond to Kim? We've got a couple of thoughts, reflections. Pretty powerful story.
Thank you, Kim. It was a beautiful story and so lovely to see your face here and remember our time together.
You too.
I was just thinking about the importance of those family connections. And I love the fact that you mentioned drawing on the strength of your grandmother. I think that we sometimes, because we don't have those family stories, we lose those connections that give us strength and show us the possibilities. It was just a very beautiful story. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really extraordinary story that feels like it's so important for it to be told, to be heard. And I think I just want to pick up on what Dave just said, that idea of this kind of remembered deep in the bones kind of strength across generations. It's something I'm thinking a lot about right now as well. So thank you. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm struck,
Oh.
Kim, by the power of a personal narrative, in that I know this story as a cultural narrative. I know that the Magdalene Diaries existed. I know the politics around that, but how that becomes grounded in a particular life and its generational impact reminds me of, how stories both broaden our world, but they're about making that intimate connection, how it touches us, I think, in that moment. And so listening to you tell the story of your grandmother, for me, really illuminated both of those trajectories of coming to know a story. Yeah.
Yeah.
It also made me think of Deanna Shoemaker, who sang at one of the Joni Mitchell ones. Doesn't she have a song about the Magdalene Diaries? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Thank you.
Your story, one of the things that was evoked for me, just in listening to you and the way you told the story and the content of the story, how much of my time the last 2 months during all this social distancing has been spent in reflections of people distant in my memory, but how these memories have come pouring back, how my dreams have been so much centered on my family, my grandparents, my childhood, and the connections, in many cases, to people I didn't really know, if you know what I mean. And just wondering how widespread this is for those of us who spend so much time now with ourselves, with our partners too, if we're living with someone. And then the whole connection between memory and forgetting, how much we've forgotten by our busy everyday lives. And now in this moment of social distancing and pandemic, these memories come flooding back and give us pause to think about what we have forgotten and want to remember. So I thank you for giving me a moment to reflect on that now too.
Thank you all.
I want to say something very quickly, Kim. Thank you for your powerful narrative. I was raised by my grandmother, and what really touched me, your story, is the matriarchal lineage, you know, from woman to woman to woman in those positions. And I think it's extremely important, you know, because that's not the stories we've been told. Those are not stories there. You know? So I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Claudio. It was, for me, because it was never talked about, because, you know, I don't think up to a few years ago I would have even dared to tell that story in public, even if I'd known it, you know, it would have felt shameful or something like that. And now it doesn't, you know. I feel quite proud. But it also makes me realize how much of that we carry in us without us even knowing. There's a statue in Galway City of a Magdalene, a pregnant woman standing with a sheet behind her back. And years ago, I created a sculpture in a Jungian workshop, a clay model of this woman with her arms in the air and this great pregnant belly. And the only thing that's missing is the sheet. You know, it's like, I mean, I just don't understand how I could have that story somewhere in me, and even the representation of it in another country. I was touched by your story to Claudio, because I've had this sense of, I'm not Irish and I feel totally Irish, and I'm not English and I feel totally English. And I was brought up in Liverpool, which, you know, laughingly we call the capital of Ireland because that's where all the Irish fled to. And was brought up on the Irish songs about the bloody English who came in and hung the young men at the crossroads at midnight. The black and tans came and, you know, the British emptied their prisons and they came and shot our young men. And here was I, you know, a little English girl sitting in an English house, hearing these stories about the bloody English. And, you know, who does this say I am? You know, where do I belong in all of this? And because those stories are missing, my mother's story was missing too. I only found my mother's story because I didn't know my mother had been brought up in an orphanage until very recent years too. So it's been a very powerful journey. So thank you for giving me an opportunity and a sense of that being okay in this community.
Thank you. Jackie, could I ask you to read your or contribute your piece next, please?
Yes. Kim talked about the interconnected web of relationships, and I have to say how happy I am to be sharing those relationships with you right now, this fellowship with you, and also how much I value my friendship with Kim since she moved to her little corner of Brexit land. The move brought her fresh challenges, but it brought she and I closer together, and I've really valued that. Confined to the house as a member of an assigned vulnerable group, and with time aplenty, I read about the creativity and productivity of others. I see images on social media of beautiful artifacts people have made. I watch TV programs in which people are sewing, making pottery, painting. This is not me under lockdown. Kate Fox, a writer, performance poet and broadcaster whom I follow on Twitter, tweeted wryly last night. Unfortunately, I might have to be expelled from the communal lockdown experience as I have no urge to paint a pebble. Perhaps it will kick in week 10. In fact, I have gained some pleasure from another poet's tweets, which are accompanied by pictures of the unpainted pebbles he picks up from his local beach. But I know where Kate is coming from. I think about the nature of art and creativity. I remember a poem I wrote many years ago after attending a workshop. And I wonder when I might be able to keep the promise it contains in any medium whatever. Women's workshop. Today we are picture making. There are paints, coloured tissue and paste, felt tips, crayons and pastels to use just how you like. Make a picture of what you feel. I had my child with me. She felt excited. She looked lovingly at the materials, hers to use. When the word was given, she approached the table, looked at the bright powder paints, picked up a fat new paintbrush, a pretty blue and white plate for mixing, and a piece of thick white paper, grainy to the touch. As she paused a moment to savour such abundance, I selected a grey lead pencil and left her. I sat on the floor and laid aside the paint and brush. First I thought, then I wrote, then I drew. I tried to translate my ideas into pictorial images, like an advertiser, filtering feelings, modifying for public consumption, impression management.
Yeah.
I tried to get it exactly right. There wasn't time. There never is. One more minute. I ran back to the table, too late to mix paints now. Nearly all the felt tips had gone, grabbed by excited children. I picked up a couple and dryly scribbled on the edge of my picture. Now it was time to sit in a circle and share our pictures. I looked up and saw colour all around. Red for passion, green for growth, black for pain, blue for peace and healing, yellow flower of friendship, stick people dancing, lines swirling, Tai Chi figure standing fast, fronds reaching upwards and circles spreading outwards, crossing boundaries, uncontrollable, refusing to be confined by the edges of the paper. I hadn't noticed my child silently sit down beside me, but I observed her now. She looked at each picture in turn. She listened to the other children telling the stories of their pictures. She felt their sadness, but was not overcome by it. She shared their joy and hope. She was lifted by their energy. I saw her wide smile and wide eyes. I saw them turn and look at my picture and stare at the hard grey lines thrown into sharp relief by the small patch of scribbled colour. From the other side of the circle, the paper must have looked blank. She screwed up her disappointment into a ball and handed it to me. I took it and I swallowed it and felt the hard, familiar lump lodge in my breast. She could no longer look at the other children and hid her face. A nice thing is that at the end, you have something to take away with you to do with what you want. I heard them chattering about hanging up their pictures on the kitchen wall. Silently, I got up and put the unused brush and Dutch plate back on the table. She didn't cry till we got outside. We went for a walk, and as I pushed my picture into a litter bin, I comforted her with the promise that we would make a beautiful picture together one day, she and I.
Jackie, that was so wonderful. I feel like I'm one of those people that need to be outed for not using this time to be productive and wonderful. And oh, isn't this a great time for gestation and creativity? And I simply have not broken into that yet. I haven't had that breakthrough.
I'm shaking your hand.
And, and of course, then we go through periods of beating ourselves up about that and know that we shouldn't and look at a part of the creative process and blah, blah, blah. And it was part of my feeling of the use of the word bereft. Yours, and as QI does, your work really gave me some ability to make some meaning of that, because that's what QI is. And now, but when I say bereft, I don't mean void of meaning, and I mean, and it's not something that needs to be fixed or filled. It's like you just gave us. It's this thing that is a push and a pull and a space of wreckage. I don't know, that word keeps coming back to me in these last few weeks for some reason. Wreckage and recuperation, and it just keeps going back and forth. And so for me, you've done what QI has always done for me, which is assist me in moving forward and making meaning and finding a place for my feelings of shame, inadequacy. And I look at those, though, I do look at those as useful spaces. And I look at those as useful spaces because of the kinds of things that you and everybody around here and people who aren't in the Brady Bunch thing right here have given me throughout the years. And that's why, like Claudio is saying, this is a really hard week because of that. It's a really hard week. And my husband and my son have been so good at being kind with me about it, because we should be somewhere else. And I'm very happy to be here with ourselves. But thank you for that. I'm sorry I'm going on here. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Tammy. I think it's another loss not to be able to do the things that that we enjoy doing most, whether it's writing or any kind of making.
Yeah.
I read a New Statesman article this morning about why people are experiencing a widespread loss of focus and an inability to focus, and it reminded the reader of the fight or flight, but it said, reminded us that there's another one in the middle that's freeze, fight, freeze, or flight. And I think it's a bit like that. It's a kind of paralysis, really, that comes from the low-level anxiety that we're all experiencing all the time. So thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Jackie, I wanted to say thank you for mentioning about freeze. So I think that's the best way to explain it, as well. For me, the love has grown and it's been so wonderful. I have too not been very productive, and I thought I've been beating myself up, feeling guilty for being happy about my renewed love, but also feeling guilty about being happy, and and then on top of that, feeling like since I am happy, maybe I should be productive.
Right.
But I'm not, and it is a freeze. And thank you for throwing in that word in between fight and flight, because it's a time that is suspended almost. So thank you very much, and I loved your poem.
Thanks, David. I was interested in your word there, we should. There's that should that always there in our ears. Yeah.
Sophie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I had a therapist once who, and I don't know if this is true, but she told me that the fight or flight model was based on research with men. And when they expanded the research to include women, looking at the sort of amygdala stress response, that's when they found freeze, as you mentioned, but also affiliate as another way that we respond to stress. And that just makes me think so much of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. No, I've not heard of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it makes sense because when you have small children that you're responsible for, you can't fight or flee necessarily, right? So those are ways of remaining in place and trying to protect yourself, which is what we are all called upon to do now.
Thanks, everybody. The conversation is wonderful as well. So I think next up is Bryant Keith Alexander on The Pulse of Morning. Over to you, Bryant.
Allow me to just simply say up front that I am more in love with all of you now, more than ever. I find myself returning over and over, almost daily, to this poem by Maya Angelou that many of you know. So allow me to share my feeling of this piece. A rock, a river, a tree. Host to species long since departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur, who left dry tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. But today, the rock cries out to us, clearly, forcefully, come. You may stand on my back and face your distant destiny, but seek no haven in my shadow. I will give you no more hiding place down here. You created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long face down in ignorance, your mouths spilling words armed for slaughter. The rock cries out today, you may stand on me, but not hide your face. Across the wall of the world, a river sings a beautiful song. Come, rest here on my side, each of you a bordered country, delicate and strangely made proud, yet thrusting perpetually under siege. Your armed struggles for profit have left collars of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast, yet today I call you to my riverside. If you will study war no more. Come, come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the stone were one. Before cynicism was a bloody sear across your brow, and when you yet knew you still knew nothing. The river sings and sings on. There is a true yearning to respond to the singing river and the wise rock. So say the Asian, the Hispanic, the Jew, the African and Native American, the Sioux, the Catholic, the Muslim, the French, the Greek, the Irish, the rabbi, the priest, the sheik, the gay, the straight, the preacher, the privileged, the homeless, the teacher. They hear, they all hear the speaking of the tree. Today, the first and last of every tree speaks to humankind. Come here, beside the river. Plant yourself beside me, here, beside the river. Each of you, descendant of some passed on traveler, has been paid for. You, who gave me my first name. You, Pawnee, Apache, Seneca. You, Cherokee Nation. You rested with me, then forced on bloody feet, left me to the employment of others seeking desperate for gain, for starving, for gold. You, the Turk, the Swede, the German, the Scot, you, the Ashanti, the Yoruba, the crew, bought, sold, stolen, arriving on a nightmare, praying for a dream. Here, root yourself beside me. I am the tree planted by the river which will not be moved. The river, I, the tree, I am yours. Your passages have been paid. Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawn. For you, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, and if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it into the palms of your hands, mold it into the shape of your most private need, sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Do not be wedded forever to fear, eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps for courage. Here, on the pulse of this fine day, you may have the courage to look up and out upon me the rock, river, the tree, no less to Midas than the Medicant, no less you know now than the mastodon then. Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out into your sister's eyes, into your brother's face, your country, and simply say, very simply, with hope, good morning.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bryant. That was so energizing, so beautiful, so powerful. So lovely to hear you say those words.
Beautiful.
Thank you. This reminds me of how just watching you in your little Brady Bunch frame, how powerful.
Yes.
We can feel it. It works. It still works. You know, like that human to human, that just, it's such a joy, of course, to always, you know, see you perform, and it just, it works here. So
Yeah.
I'm just reminding myself of the power of the connection.
Yeah.
Yes, Deanna. It's like performance will never leave the body behind. It just doesn't. It always brings the body forth, even in these cells that we find ourselves. It always brings the body forth. And Bryant always brings the body forward.
I so appreciate, Bryant, this coming out of a performance of literature. So
Yeah.
the ways in which different performance aesthetics body forth a text, right? So I can imagine you doing this on a stage with all that. And yet the skill, the training, the attention to text and breath that comes to lift that particular text up with that kind of precision it reminds me of the power of performance of literature and the skill that it takes to do that. It reminds me of what it means when an extraordinary text meets an extraordinary performer, and that fusion of those two voices, bodies working at the height of their craft was a thing of beauty beyond all other things that it brought. That was such a thing of beauty to see her poem voiced in that way, with the intimacy of just your face and gestures. I have known probably, some years now, with familiarity, with a different maturity. And so it is a joy. So many of our moments, Bryant, come forward for me as I watch you do that poem. So thank you.
Bryant, do you know when that piece was written?
It was the inaugural poem presidential for. Remind me. I'm full in the moment.
Clinton? Clinton?
Wasn't it for Clinton?
It was, yeah, I think so.
I get some comfort from that as well, from something that was then 20-something years ago. It still seems to be so relevant to right now, this moment. I find that comforting.
Good morning, Bryant. I love you, brother. Good morning. Thank you.
Brian, I want to thank you for your expressions of love, both in the email and now. I mean, that's just beautiful. And I think it's what we all need at this moment. We don't have physical hugs, but your words were just very soothing. Thank you.
Brian, I just want to comment that it's the poets who lead the way. And David touched on that because how long ago this was written, and a reminder of a lot of that text, that poetry speaking to the interconnectedness of the human and the non-human, right? All those years ago. And,
thank you.
Yes.
How our stories are interconnected.
Yeah.
Both the good ones and the bad ones. So thank you for sharing that.
And how a microscopic organism has brought us to our knees. Maybe that's where we should be, on our knees for a while, feeling the earth and the rock and picking up the rock and smelling it and feeling our knees scuffed against the dirt and all of that.
Thank you, Katrina, for making this happen for all of us.
Yeah, Katrina, yeah.
Well, I cherish your love, all of you, so much. You are all very special to me. Even the couple of you that I don't know so well who are joining us for the first time. Who is it? Simone. You're very welcome here. And my life, my understanding of the world and other people and relationships have only been enhanced by reading all of your work and by being a part of this community. So I'm just, you know, you've all taught me that this is what we should do. So I'm just doing what I've been taught to do. So shall we move on to the next one? Djenane Oliveira, all the way from Brazil. And you're in the top hand corner of my screen. And it's over to you. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me here. I'm going running so I can relax a bit. I screamed to my husband, already outside the door. It's March 18th. My brain is full and exhausted of thinking. As I run, my brain goes in full power. What if this pandemic hits Brazil very hard? What will happen to the millions of people who don't have sewage or running water in this country? And the people in favelas? And my family in Caratinga, a town that, even in normal circumstances, does not have reliable health system. What about my classes? What about the course I'm supposed to teach in Croatia in a month? In the autoethnography class, Simone and I are teaching for the first time in our graduate program. I was so excited about that class. It's unimaginable for most people, such a class in a pharmacy school, but not for us. We have been envisioning it for a long time now. I'm quickly brought back to the running path as a young man almost runs over me. A surge of fear invades me, a fear of being infected by this man, a fear of dying. He's young, can be infected and asymptomatic. Should I be here without a mask? So much in my mind and so much going on in my body. I'm in bed and my breath is accelerated. My heart is pounding too fast. I can't breathe. I might be infected. Djenane, you are anxious. Relax, I tell to myself. Breathe in, breathe out. I'm transferred to that time after the death of my brother when I had a similar feeling, which ended up with an anxiety attack. Come back, Djenane. I open the meditation app on my phone and find a 4-minute guided medication. I'm slowly taken by the soft voice of the woman in the app. The university has canceled classes for an undetermined period of time. Over 50% of students don't have access to high quality internet. And this is one of the most important research universities in Brazil. But in the graduate level, if all students agree, we can teach online. But how could the students focus in a class during a time like this anyway? I can't even think straight. How could I teach? Unless we reflect on and share experiences associated with this moment. Of course. Why didn't I think of that before? We can learn about autoethnography as we do autoethnography collaboratively about our experience of living through the pandemic in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. I arrive home, I talk to Simone, and she enjoys the idea. Then we create a WhatsApp group to present the plan of a virtual class on autoethnography to the students. They love it. We are 11 people, pharmacists, physicians, and educators. Some students, we carry out an autoethnography as their research projects, while for others, this is completely a new methodology. Some of us are clinicians in the front lines of the pandemic, and some are in quarantine. Stopping and seeing the beginnings. Everything is new for all of us. Staying home with our families, homeschooling our sons and daughters, cleaning our homes ourselves. We have to remember that Brazilians are well known as people who are a bit obsessed about cleaning. We take multiple showers during a day, which can irritate some of my foreign friends. And our houses have to be kept very neat. The reason most of us who are part of middle class have a cleaning lady that comes to our home usually once a week. So now we have to clean our house. We have to cook our food instead of eating out. We are learning new guidelines to go safely to the supermarket. That feels like going to a battle. Using masks, running after alcohol and alcohol gel that went missing for weeks in Belo Horizonte. I have to go to the campus to get some documents. I'm the chair of the social pharmacy department, and there are issues that I need to take care of. The day is beautiful, a typical day in fall in Belo Horizonte. The campus is empty. It's strange to be here without hundreds of people walking around. I stop my car and start taking pictures of buildings, trees, and flowers I encounter my way. This campus is gorgeous. I realize I have never really experienced this campus as I'm doing it now. What an odd feeling. In 24 years, I have always been in a hurry here. I sent Simone an audio sharing my feelings of gratitude for being able to do what I love, being a professor, and for working in such a lovely place. I happily and loudly sing my favorite bossa nova songs as I drive back home. As we read great exemplars of autoethnography by people here, Katrina, Claudio, Carolyn, Art, Tammy, for example, we write about our experience of living in this new world. We send our writings to a shared drive and start every virtual encounter with our readings. Time has slowed down for us. My commitments are postponed. There is no place to go other than the grocery store. It's time to look more slowly, to think more slowly, to feel more slowly. There is an opportunity to linger. I like this new pace. Someone in the group even describes her rituals and pleasures of cleaning her home. On the other hand, it's also time to realize our finitude. I ruminate sometimes about my own death. A runny nose when I'm in the bakery tortures me as I picture myself infected with the new coronavirus. I think and fear the death of people I love. I start watching videos about emotional intelligence and resilience. I must be strong. A student writes about resolving issues so that she can be ready to die. Another person reflects on how she has been taking life or being alive for granted. And we converse about gratitude and the fact that we should celebrate life. It's time of thinking of death, but also time to rejoice being alive. Expanding the circle of us. It's not about me. The pandemic is about us, and it goes beyond us in our class. The following couple of weeks brings up different stories conveying very distinct experiences. The virus impacts our Brazilian people differently. As it's in the case in other countries, the pandemic makes the racial, economic, and geographic inequities of Brazil more clear. We become uncomfortably aware of our privilege as educated middle-class individuals in this country. The structure of our public healthcare system varies according to the region. The health system in cities like Manaus in the Amazon and Belém are already approaching their full capacity. But the media doesn't give it too much attention. We wonder if those bodies don't matter for the media or our governments. One student sends a message to the TV Globo, the main TV network, calling attention to the situation in the north of the country. Don't they matter? We want to know their faces. We want to hear their voices. They're not only numbers, says the student. Domestic violence is growing dramatically in many countries in a time of social distancing. What might be going on in Brazil, the 5th most violent country for women in the world? We wonder. We read an autoethnography by Loreen also about her experience of abuse. We, the 9 women in the group, can relate to Olson's descriptions. We have lived similar situations throughout our lives in Brazil. It's not easy to be a woman in such a machista country. We feel united by our sorority. But it hasn't been bad for everybody. A student writes a beautiful text about the environment. As we are locked down in our homes, the animals and the plants are free. As the virus makes it harder for the sick humans to breathe, the planet is breathing well. We think of a world without us. And we imagine a court that will decide if you have the right to be here. What would defend us? What or who gives us the right to take so much from our planet? We think of the Anthropocene. We question our consumption habits and think of the garbage we produce. Will the pandemic change our habits toward ourselves, toward others, towards our planets? Going national, going nuts. The virus produced a major crisis in Brazil, as it did worldwide, but feels like we have an even bigger crisis here. The President Jair Bolsonaro, a leader that doesn't lead, someone that can only function when there is battle, there is crisis, there is dispute. So he produced crisis, a crisis per day. After being isolated for almost 2 months and seeing the number of deaths skyrocketing, 1,176 deaths yesterday, I experienced feelings of helplessness. I feel adrift in very turbulent waters. 2 ministers of health in 2 months, and a president that never said he's sorry to the families that are burying their loved ones every day. It's sickening. Nonetheless, there is Esperança, hope. As we created this autoethnography community via virtual class, more communities can be generated and new realities imagined. For me, our Monday gatherings has been one of the best moments in this quarantine. By writing and sharing our experiences with the crisis, we found commonalities, divergences, and created new answers to some of the rising questions. I have a strong feeling of companionship, and I believe we created a space of care, a healing space. And with regards to autoethnography, even in a time of social distancing, through writing about something that completely enveloped and connected us as the pandemic did, we moved effortlessly from the personal to the cultural, which became very clear throughout the course. Furthermore, sharing our stories fostered empathy for the situation of the other and built bridges across differences within the group. By accepting the challenge to teach this online course, autoethnography taught me, about us, about Brazil, and about going beyond what it is to what it could be.
Thank you, Djenane.
You're welcome.
You've inspired me to rework my graduate class in the fall, which will very likely be online. Beautiful. Of course. This is lovely.
It's it kind of saved me during this time. It's been amazing to have this group of people every week and sharing, what we have in common. So.
Obrigado, Janine. Your piece touched me in many aspects. I mean, I'm Brazilian too. I'm here, and the rituals, the worries, you know, like in the center, in the epicenter right now of this pandemic, to the epicenter to be, because Brazil is getting there. It's gonna be there. And there's so many things we could talk, the way you touched, but I think another thing that can't be forgotten or has to be emphasized in your piece is like, in your work, in your life. It's like one of my big dreams is like, Simone is here, Gustavo was here. It's like that one day Brazilians don't need to travel thousands of miles away to learn autoethnography, to learn performance, you know, and teaching and creating those classes in a pharmacy department.
Yes, I know.
I dare you. The pharmacy.
I mean, there's nothing. So, I mean, I need to thank you. Obrigado, querida.
Oh, de nada. Thank you guys for teaching me all this, and we are creating a community. You know, Simone and Gustavo, actually Gustavo, I should say, Gustavo came to this class of ours a couple of weeks ago to share his experiences and his autoethnographic work. So, you know, we are trying to create this community here. That's for sure. So it's exciting.
I'd like to thank you, Djenane, for pathing me through autoethnography, and Katrina to receive me here. It's amazing to see and to listen to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Djenane and Simone, so nice to meet both of you. And Djenane, I just thought your story was beautifully written. So thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you. Very nice to listen, hear that from you. Thank you. We are trying. We want to get good at this. You know, we want to do that.
Let us know if we can help at all. Okay.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.